The soft hum of laboratory equipment filled the small research room as Dr. James Miller stared at his computer screen, his tired eyes reflecting the blue glow of complex data patterns. It was 3 a.m. at the Earth Defense Research Institute, and he was the only one still working, just like every other night for the past 6 months. "This can't be right," he muttered, running his hand through his messy gray hair. The particle interaction data from the deep space probe showed something impossible, something that defied everything he knew about quantum physics. He had been studying the effects of dark matter on regular matter in deep space, a routine project that shouldn't have shown anything unusual. But there it was, a pattern that suggested matter could be manipulated at its most basic level, far beyond what current science thought possible. Miller reached for his coffee cup, found it empty, and sighed. He'd lost count of how many cups he'd had today. The cleaning robot beeped softly as it moved around his feet, picking up scattered papers he'd dropped earlier. "Computer, run the simulation again," he commanded. "Full spectrum analysis." The massive screens on the wall lit up with swirling patterns of quantum interactions. Most scientists would see chaos in these patterns, but Miller saw something different. He saw a door opening to possibilities that both excited and terrified him. The computer beeped, confirming what he'd seen before. In certain conditions, far from any star's influence, particles behaved differently. They could be manipulated in ways that could change the very nature of matter itself. Miller's hands shook as he typed his findings into his personal log. If he was right, this discovery could revolutionize everything, from space travel to energy production. But something else nagged at his mind, a darker possibility he didn't want to consider. The next morning, Miller presented his findings to the Institute's board. He stood before 12 of Earth's top scientists, his worn lab coat contrasting with their crisp business suits. "As you can see," he pointed to the holographic display, "the particle behavior suggests we can create targeted quantum disruptions. The implications for energy production alone are staggering." Dr. Roberts, the head of the board, leaned forward. "And you discovered this through the Deep Space Probe program?" "Yes," Miller nodded. "The effects are only visible in regions with minimal stellar interference. We never saw it before because we weren't looking in the right places." The room fell silent as the board members studied his data. Miller could feel sweat forming on his forehead. He'd worked at the Institute for 20 years, built his reputation on solid, careful research. What he was proposing now seemed like science fiction. "Dr. Miller," Roberts spoke finally, his voice heavy with concern, "while your research is interesting, it appears highly theoretical. The energy requirements alone make practical applications impossible, not to mention the potential dangers of manipulating matter at this level." "But if we could control it," Miller started. "The risks are too high," Roberts cut him off. "We're scientists, not weapons engineers. This line of research could too easily be militarized. The board's decision is final. Your funding for this project is denied." Miller stood there, stunned. They couldn't see it, or maybe they were afraid to see it. He gathered his materials with shaking hands as the board members filed out, already discussing their next meeting. Later that night, back in his lab, Miller stared at his research data. The board was wrong. This wasn't just theoretical. It was real, and it was important. He didn't know why yet, but something told him humanity would need this knowledge someday. He pressed his hand against the cool glass of his lab window, looking out at the distant stars. Up there somewhere, the universe was trying to tell him something. And he would keep listening, with or without the board's approval. Opening a new file on his computer, Miller began typing. Personal research log. Day 1 of independent study. He didn't know it then, but this decision would eventually change the fate of humanity forever. 6 months after his discovery, Dr. Miller sat in his small apartment watching the emergency broadcast. His cold dinner lay forgotten on the coffee table as the news anchor's voice trembled with fear. "This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Unknown vessels have appeared in orbit around all major Earth colonies. Similar ships have been detected approaching Earth. All citizens are advised to. The broadcast cut off. Miller's lights flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness. Through his window, he watched as the night sky lit up with strange, purple lights. The Dominion had arrived. Their ships appeared first as tiny dots, then grew into massive dark shapes that blocked out the stars. Each vessel was the size of a small city, their hulls covered in what looked like living metal that shifted and moved like waves in an ocean. Miller's phone buzzed. A message from the Institute. All research stay AFF. REPORTINMMEDOA. Emergency protocols in EFFEC. He grabbed his research tablet and ran to his car. The streets were chaos. People running, cars honking, sirens wailing in the distance. Above it all, the alien ships hung in the sky like giant storm clouds. The first attack came without warning. A beam of purple energy shot down from one of the ships, hitting the city's power plant. Instead of an explosion, there was a strange rippling effect, as if reality itself was being twisted. When it cleared, the entire facility was gone, leaving only a perfectly smooth crater. Miller reached the Institute just as the military arrived. Soldiers were setting up defense positions while scientists rushed inside. Dr. Roberts met him at the entrance, looking older than Miller remembered. "They hit our colony on Mars first," Roberts said, his voice hollow. 10,000 people. The colony's dome. It just disappeared, like it was never there. Inside the Institute's main lab, screens showed feeds from around the solar system. The Dominion ships were everywhere, their technology far beyond anything humanity had ever seen. A video from a military base showed a close-up of one of their soldiers, tall, metallic-skinned beings with bodies that seemed to flow like mercury. "Their bodies," Miller whispered, watching the footage. "They're using some kind of quantum field manipulation, just like in my research." A general Miller didn't recognize stepped forward. "They've sent a message. They're calling themselves the Dominion. They say we have 1 month to surrender, or they'll do to Earth what they did to Mars." "What are our chances?" someone asked. "Our weapons don't work on them," the general replied. "Bullets pass right through. Energy weapons get absorbed. It's like they're made of living metal, but more advanced than anything we've ever seen." Miller's mind raced. The particle behavior he'd discovered in deep space. Could it be related to how the Dominion's technology worked? He pulled out his research tablet, fingers flying over the screen as he compared his data to the readings from the alien ships. "Dr. Roberts," he called out, his voice urgent. "Look at this. The quantum signature from their weapons. It matches the patterns I found 6 months ago. The research you said was too dangerous." Roberts leaned over the tablet, his face growing pale. "My God. You weren't discovering something new. You were detecting them. Their technology leaves traces in deep space." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Miller's theoretical research might be the only thing that could help them understand the enemy's technology. An explosion rocked the building. Through the windows, they could see more Dominion ships arriving, their hulls shimmering with that strange, living metal. The general turned to Miller. "Doctor, whatever you were working on, it's not theoretical anymore. You have 1 month to turn it into a weapon or Earth dies. Can you do it?" Miller looked at his data, then at the alien ships in the sky. "I'll need a lab, full access to all our resources, and every piece of information we can gather about their technology." He picked up his tablet, his discovery no longer just an interesting scientific puzzle. Now it was humanity's last hope. "And coffee," he added. "Lots of coffee." 3 days had passed since the invasion began. Deep underground in the Institute's emergency bunker, Dr. Miller hadn't slept for more than a few hours at a time. His new lab was a maze of holographic displays, each showing different aspects of his research and data collected from the Dominion's attacks. "Play it again," he told the computer, rubbing his tired eyes. The screen showed footage of a Dominion soldier walking through a wall of bullets like they were raindrops. Their metallic skin rippled and shifted, somehow moving the matter of their bodies around the incoming projectiles. Miller took another sip of cold coffee and pulled up his original research data. Computer, overlay the quantum patterns from my deep space readings with the energy signature from the Dominion soldier. The patterns appeared side by side, then merged. They matched perfectly. That's it, Miller whispered. They're not just using the quantum field, they're living inside it. The door opened, and Dr. Roberts walked in carrying fresh data tablets. Any progress? Miller pointed to the screen. Look at this. The Dominion aren't just aliens with advanced technology. They've evolved, or engineered themselves, to exist partially in quantum space. That's why our weapons can't hurt them. They can shift their physical form through quantum states. Can you explain that in simpler terms? Roberts asked, setting down the tablets. Miller grabbed a pen and paper. Sometimes old methods were best for explaining new ideas. He drew 2 circles. Think of it this way. Normal matter, like us, exists in one quantum state. He pointed to the first circle. But the Dominion can shift between states instantly. He drew arrows between the circles. When something tries to hit them, they simply move their matter to another state where the attack can't reach them. Roberts studied the drawing. So how do we fight something that can do that? A smile crossed Miller's face. We don't fight their bodies. We fight their ability to shift. He pulled up new calculations on the main screen. If we can create a quantum cascade effect, like ripples in a pond, we can disrupt their ability to control their quantum state. And then they'll be trapped in normal space, vulnerable, like us. Miller turned to another screen showing his original particle interaction data. My discovery wasn't just about detecting them. It was the key to understanding how their entire species functions. And if we understand it, we can break it, Roberts finished. Miller nodded, but his expression was troubled. The weapon I'm thinking of, it wouldn't just hurt their soldiers. It would affect their entire species at once. Their quantum shifting ability seems to be connected through some kind of network. If we disrupt it, you'd be targeting their entire race, Roberts said quietly. The weight of what they were discussing filled the room. This wouldn't be a normal weapon. It would be closer to a genetic attack, targeting the very thing that made the Dominion what they were. An alarm blared through the facility. On the security screens, they watched as another city disappeared under the Dominion's weapons. More lives lost. More proof that humanity couldn't win a conventional war. Miller turned back to his calculations. I'll need to modify the particle accelerator to generate the initial quantum pulse. Then we'll need a way to amplify it across space. How long? Roberts asked. Maybe 2 weeks to build a prototype, if it works. Miller looked at the casualty reports scrolling across one of his screens. That's if everything goes perfectly, and if I'm right about all of this. And if you're wrong. Miller's hands hovered over his keyboard. Then we'll have wasted what little time we have left. He began typing, his fingers moving faster as new ideas formed. Get me everything we have on quantum entanglement, and I need access to the experimental physics lab. The race against time had begun. In orbit above them, more Dominion ships arrived each day. 26 days remained until their deadline, and humanity's last hope rested on one scientist's theory about how to kill a quantum-shifting species. Miller only hoped he could live with himself if he succeeded. The prototype sat on Miller's workbench like an innocent metal box, its quantum core pulsing with a soft blue light. 2 weeks of non-stop work had produced something that looked so simple, yet could destroy an entire species. The thought made his hands shake as he adjusted the final connections. First test ready, he announced to the small team gathered in the underground testing chamber. Dr. Roberts stood behind thick safety glass with General Adams, who had become a regular visitor as the deadline grew closer. Miller placed a sample of Dominion metal, recovered from a crashed scout ship, inside the testing chamber. The metallic substance still moved slightly, maintaining its quantum state even separated from its host. Starting quantum pulse in 3, 2, 1. He pressed the button. The prototype hummed to life, sending invisible waves of quantum disruption through the chamber. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Dominion metal began to shake. Its flowing surface became rigid, then started to crack like dried mud. Energy readings are off the scale, Jane reported from her monitoring station. The quantum field is collapsing exactly as predicted. Miller watched as the sample broke apart, its pieces turning dull and lifeless. The test was a success, and that terrified him. Later that night, alone in his office, Miller reviewed the test footage again. The weapon worked better than he'd expected. Too well. The quantum disruption would spread through the Dominion's neural network like a virus, affecting every member of their species connected to it. His computer beeped with an incoming transmission. The screen showed a refugee camp in what used to be New York. Survivors huddled in makeshift shelters while Dominion ships hovered overhead. Among them, he spotted a familiar face, his brother Tom and his family. James, Tom's voice crackled through the poor connection. They're everywhere now. Last night, they took another 1,000 people. Just disappeared them, like they did with Mars. The kids are scared. Everyone's scared. Miller looked at his niece and nephew on the screen, their faces thin and frightened. Then he thought about the Dominion's children, who would die just as certainly as their soldiers when his weapon activated. I'm working on something, Miller said carefully. Just hold on a little longer. After the call ended, he pulled up the weapon's schematics again. There had to be a way to limit its effect, to target only military targets. But every simulation showed the same result. The quantum cascade would spread through their entire network. It was all or nothing. General Adams visited the next morning, looking grimmer than usual. The Dominion hit our underground bases in Europe, he reported. Somehow they've learned to extend their quantum field through solid rock. Nowhere is safe now. How soon can the weapon be ready? Miller gestured to the prototype. It works. But General, you need to understand what this will do. It won't just kill their soldiers. Every Dominion connected to their quantum network will die. Civilians. Children. Their entire civilization. And if we do nothing, it's our civilization that dies, Adams replied. They've given us no choice. There's always a choice, Miller said quietly. Is there? Adams walked to the window overlooking the testing chamber. 12 days left until their deadline. Each day we wait costs thousands of lives. Sometimes, the only choices we have are bad ones. Miller looked at his creation, thinking of his family in that refugee camp, of Mars, of all humanity had lost. The weapon could save his species, but the cost would haunt him forever. I need 24 hours, he said finally. One last attempt to modify it, to find another way. Adams nodded. 24 hours, but that's all we can spare. Miller turned back to his work, the fate of 2 civilizations weighing on his shoulders. The weapon hummed softly behind him, waiting for a decision that would change the universe forever. The underground lab buzzed with nervous energy as Miller prepared for the final test. He hadn't slept in 36 hours, pushing past his 24-hour deadline. The prototype had been modified 6 times, each change bringing them closer to something that might work. Power systems ready, Jane called out from her station. The weapon now took up half the testing chamber, much bigger than the original prototype. Cooling pipes snaked across its surface, carrying liquid nitrogen to prevent overheating. Begin recording, Miller ordered. Test number 7 of the modified quantum disruptor. This time, instead of a small sample, they had a captured Dominion weapon in the chamber. Its surface still rippled with that strange, living metal. Next to it sat the original sample from their first test, now dead and lifeless. Miller took a deep breath and activated the weapon. The room hummed with power as quantum waves filled the chamber. At first, nothing happened. Then the Dominion weapon began to change. Quantum field is destabilizing, Jane reported. But it's different from before. The pattern is holding steady. Miller leaned forward, watching closely. The weapon's surface stopped flowing but didn't crack apart like the previous sample. Instead, it shifted to a solid, unchanging form. "It worked," he whispered. "Computer, show quantum state analysis." Holographic displays filled the air around him. The new version of his weapon didn't destroy the quantum network, it locked it in place. The Dominion technology was still intact, just frozen in a single state. "Dr. Miller," Jane's voice was urgent. "Something's happening." The Dominion weapon suddenly pulsed with light. Energy readings spiked across all monitors. Before anyone could react, it sent out a wave of purple energy that shattered the chamber's reinforced windows. Miller dove for cover as alarms blared. Emergency shields slammed down, containing the blast. When the dust settled, he saw that the testing chamber was scorched black, but the Dominion weapon was completely destroyed. "Is everyone all right?" he called out, helping Jane up from where she'd taken cover. "What happened?" General Adams demanded, rushing into the lab. Miller studied the readings on his tablet. The weapon worked too well. "We locked their quantum field in place, but the energy had to go somewhere. It fed back into their own technology. And what? And it overloaded. Destroyed itself." Miller's mind raced with possibilities. "This is it. We don't have to kill them. We can lock their quantum abilities in place, and their own power will." A massive explosion rocked the facility, stronger than anything they'd felt before. Emergency lights flashed as dust fell from the ceiling. "They found us," Adams said, checking his tactical display. "Multiple ships directly overhead. They're burning through the mountain." Miller looked at his weapon, his last prototype. "How long until they reach us?" "Minutes. Maybe less." "Jane, start the emergency upload. Send all our data to the backup facilities." Miller turned to the weapon, fingers flying over the control panel. "The prototype isn't ready for full deployment, but it might buy us time." "You can't stay here," Adams argued. "We need you and your research." Another explosion, closer this time. The lights flickered. "No time to move it," Miller said. "And if they get their hands on this technology." He shook his head. "Jane, are the uploads done?" She checked her screen. 98% complete. The ceiling groaned as another blast hit the mountain above them. Through the cracks, purple light began to shine through. "Get to the escape tunnels," Miller ordered. "I'll set the weapon to overload. The quantum backlash should take out their ships, maybe even disrupt their network temporarily." Jane started to argue. "Go," he shouted. "The research is what matters. Get it to the other facilities. Build a better version." He managed a small smile. "And this time, make sure it doesn't blow up." As the others ran for the escape tunnels, Miller turned back to his creation. Above him, the Dominion was breaking through, but now he knew it was possible. Not to destroy them, but to stop them. If only there was enough time. His fingers moved across the controls one last time, initiating the overload sequence. The weapon hummed louder, building to something that would change everything. Miller woke up in a military hospital bed 3 days after the lab explosion. His right arm was bandaged, and his head throbbed. Through the window, he could see the purple glow of Dominion ships in the distant sky. "You're lucky to be alive," Jane said from beside his bed. She looked tired but relieved. "The escape tunnel collapsed right after we pulled you out. The whole facility is gone." "The weapon?" Miller asked, his throat dry. "Did exactly what you predicted. The quantum backlash took out 3 of their ships. But," she handed him a tablet. "You need to see this." The screen showed data from the explosion. The quantum disruption had spread further than expected, affecting Dominion ships across half the continent. Wherever the wave touched, their technology had frozen for almost an hour before they could restore their quantum network. "It worked better than we thought," Jane continued. "The other research facilities have the data. They've been building new prototypes, improving on your design. In 5 days, we'll have a weapon that could hit their entire fleet at once. Miller tried to sit up, wincing at the pain. Any word from the Dominion? That's the other thing. Jane's expression darkened. They've moved up their deadline. We don't have 7 more days. We have 2. The door opened, and General Adams walked in with Dr. Roberts. They looked like they hadn't slept in days. "Doctor," Adams nodded to Miller. "Glad to see you're awake. We need your input on the final design." Roberts put up a holographic display showing the new weapon schematics. "We've solved the energy feedback problem. The quantum lock will hold stable this time. No explosions." "But," Miller could hear it in their voices, "but we've discovered something about their network," Roberts said. "It's not just their technology that's connected. Their consciousness, their memories, everything they are. It's all quantum entangled. If we lock their quantum state, we'll trap them," Miller finished. "Not just their bodies, but their minds. They'll be frozen in time, aware but unable to move or think. Forever." The room fell silent. Outside, another explosion lit up the night sky. "The alternative is extinction," Adams said finally. "Ours, not theirs. We just lost contact with our bases in Asia. Europe has fallen. Africa is dark. In 48 hours, they'll start their final attack." Miller looked at the casualty reports scrolling across a nearby screen. Millions dead or missing. Most major cities destroyed or occupied. Human civilization was on the brink. "Show me the latest designs," he said. Jane pulled up more schematics. The new weapon was beautiful in its simplicity. No more energy feedback, no explosions. Just a clean, precise quantum lock that would spread through their entire network. "We'll only get one shot," Roberts explained. "Once we activate it, they'll either find a way to block it, or it will end the war," Adams finished. Miller studied the designs, his mind racing. The math was perfect. The science was sound. But the implications? "Have we tried to communicate with them again?" he asked. "Show them what this weapon can do. Maybe the threat would be enough." "We've tried," Adams said. "They're not interested in talking. As far as they're concerned, we're already dead." Another explosion rocked the building. Closer this time. "Doctor," Adams pressed, "we need your authorization to proceed. You designed it. You understand it better than anyone. Should we use it?" Miller looked out the window at the purple-lit sky, thinking of his family in the refugee camp, of Mars, of all humanity had lost. Then he thought of an entire species trapped in eternal, conscious stasis. The weight of the decision pressed down on him like a physical thing. In his mind, he saw 2 futures, one where humanity was erased, and one where they won at a terrible moral cost. "How long until the weapon is ready?" he asked finally. 6 hours, Roberts replied. "Just tell us what to do." Miller took a deep breath, made his choice, and changed the universe forever. The command center hummed with tense energy as Miller made his final adjustments to the quantum weapon. His injured arm ached, but he ignored the pain. They had 1 hour until the Dominion's deadline. "All stations report ready," Jane announced, her voice steady despite the pressure. Around the room, technicians and military personnel watched their screens with nervous anticipation. Miller looked at the massive device they'd built. It was nothing like his original prototype. Sleeker, more powerful, and connected to transmission arrays around the world. One button would send its quantum-locking wave across the entire planet and beyond. "Sir," a technician called out, "we're detecting movement in the Dominion fleet. All ships are shifting position." On the main screen, thousands of purple dots showed Dominion vessels moving into attack formation. Their final assault was beginning. "It's now or never," General Adams said quietly. Miller's finger hovered over the activation switch. Then a new alert blared through the command center. "Incoming transmission," Jane shouted. It's from the Dominion. They want to talk." The room fell silent. This had never happened before. "Put it through," Miller ordered. The main screen flickered, showing a Dominion commander. Its metallic form flowed like liquid mercury as it spoke, its words translated by their computers. "We have detected your weapon," the alien said. "Our scientists understand what it will do." A most impressive creation. Miller stepped forward. "Then you know we can stop you." "Yes. And you know the cost. Not death, but eternal imprisonment. For all of us." The commander's form rippled. "Including our children. Our civilians, all connected to our network." "You gave us no choice," Miller replied. "You attacked without warning. Killed millions. We believed you primitive, incapable of understanding quantum existence." The commander paused. "We were wrong." A new image appeared on the screen. Data streams showing Dominion ships pulling back, moving away from Earth. "You have proven yourselves worthy adversaries," the commander continued, "and capable of mercy by choosing a weapon that does not kill. We offer terms." Miller looked at General Adams, who nodded slowly. "What terms?" Miller asked. "We will leave your solar system. Establish clear boundaries. Open diplomatic channels. In return, you will share your quantum locking technology with other species we might encounter. As a deterrent." "You want us to be the galaxy's peacekeepers," Miller realized. "Balance is necessary. Power must be checked by power." Miller thought of all they had lost, all the deaths, the destruction. "Why should we trust you?" "Because you have proven you can stop us, and because we have proven we can destroy you. Neither outcome serves life." The command center erupted in hurried discussions. The Dominion commander waited patiently as humans debated their species' future. Finally, Miller spoke. "We accept with conditions. You will help rebuild what you destroyed. And you will share your quantum technology, the non-military applications, with us." "Agreed." The commander's form shifted into a more formal configuration. "You have created something remarkable, Dr. Miller. Not just a weapon, but a chance for peace." After the transmission ended, Miller walked to the weapons control panel. With trembling hands, he initiated the shutdown sequence. "Was it the right choice?" Jane asked softly. Miller watched as Dominion ships disappeared from their sensors, keeping their word and retreating from Earth. "We'll find out," he replied. "But we proved something today. Not just to them, but to ourselves." "What's that?" "That humanity's greatest weapon isn't our ability to destroy." He smiled slightly. "It's our ability to choose not to." 1 year later, Miller stood in his new lab, watching Earth's first quantum-powered ship prepare for launch. Around him, humans and Dominion scientists worked together, exploring the peaceful applications of their combined knowledge. The weapon remained safely guarded, a reminder to the galaxy that humanity could not be taken lightly. But it was their decision not to use it that truly changed the universe. As Miller looked at the stars through his window, he saw not a battlefield, but a future filled with possibilities. They had faced extinction and chosen peace, turned enemies into allies, and proved that the deadliest weapon could also be the key to understanding. It wasn't the ending he had expected, but it was better than the one he had feared.